Boom, everybody. Happy Saturday to you. I hope you are having an amazing weekend so far. My name is Don Terrell, and I want to welcome you to another great episode of The Color of Motion. I like to say, hey, stories come in all shades. And I highlight people of color and diverse backgrounds in the industry of motion graphics, animation, visual effects, cartoons, and comics. This space that I'm just ecstatically crazy about, by now. You know the drill. Hop into the comments, say hey, where you tuning in from, so I can give you a shout out that you so richly deserve. But I want to thank you, as always, for giving me a little bit of your time on this Saturday afternoon here. I hope everybody's having, like I said, an amazing weekend so far. Miss Maggie, appreciate you tuning in there. Good afternoon to you. Always appreciate you supporting the show for sure. Excuse me. Make sure that you hop on over to the Facebook group community. Get plugged in, facebook.com/group/The Color of Motion. Definitely want you to join in, be a part of the family. Don't miss out on any industry news that we share. You're always able to connect with a lot of great creatives there as well. So again, facebook.com/group/The Color of Motion. You can also follow us on Instagram, our Instagram page. We do have an Instagram page for the show, The Color of Motion. Definitely would love for you to follow us as well. Like I said, we are here each and every week, Saturday afternoon, 3 p.m. Central Time, and live on the YouTube channel, LinkedIn, the Facebook group for the show, and the website for the show as well. But I do always encourage everybody to go over to the YouTube channel, subscribe, hit the bell notification, comment on these episodes, because it definitely helps the algorithm as well. I'm always trying to conquer or keep up. You can't conquer. So I'm always trying to keep up with the algorithm. But definitely want you to not miss out. So hop on over to the YouTube channel, youtube.com/Don Terrell. And like I said, subscribe and hit the bell notification so you don't miss out on when we go live or when new content goes up on the channel as well. Also, the store is open. All you hop on over to the store, pick you up something nice. We have a lot of great shirts, hoodies, mugs. And like I said, I'm always putting new things in the store. And if you maybe want to see something or come across something that you might want in the store, you can definitely let me know. My big thing is, if you do pick up something, take a snapshot of yourself, send it on over to me so that I can share it on the show or share it on the social channels as well. So definitely hop on over to thecolorofmotion.net/swag and pick you up something nice for sure. Also like to give a big thank you and shout out to today's sponsor for the show, DG Graphics. They do all the graphics, overlays, animations. They help me look good. And definitely, if you're a business or a brand that's looking to level up your brand design content, create engaging content, then you should definitely look them up as well. So thank you, DG Graphics, for always sponsoring the show. I hope you are all as excited as I am. Man, I've been looking forward to this interview for a while. We had a kind of a half show before the show. We were talking so much about a lot of different things because he's such a multi-talented guy. So definitely looking forward to having him on the show as well. So, man, I need to take a drink. I'll do one as the intro goes. But I guess without, further ado, we can kind of get this show on the road and dive right into this episode. Wow, 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 and wow. We are back. We're back and ready to get this show on the road. Mr. DeWine, greetings to you. I like your new countdown screen. Yeah, I like it too. I always try and mix it up, every season and get something new. So appreciate that, Mr. DeWine, for enjoying the countdown. Like I said, I hope you guys are as excited about this episode as I am. I'm super looking forward to sitting down and really talking with my next guest here. Like I said, we had almost a full conversation before the show. So, without further ado, my next guest, he's an Emmy Award winning director and co-founder of Department of Wonder, a Texas-based immersive theater experience that combines actors with fantastical digital installations. His most recent project, Now is the Time, seeks to make Martin Luther King Jr.'s famous speech tangible to today's audiences through virtual reality. A New York City native of Dominican descent, he is proud of his diverse background and the vibrancy of his hometown. His pursuit of a creative career began while attending the prestigious LaGuardia High of Music and Art in Manhattan. This led to graduating from Ringling College of Art and Design in Florida with a bachelor's degree in illustration. With a hopeful eye toward pursuing animation and film, he first set out to make a living as an illustrator. His work has appeared in The Village Voice, Playboy, and The Atlantic, and has been published multiple times in the prestigious industry annuals American Illustration and the Society of Illustrators. He found his footing in film when he joined the art department of Dallas-based Real Effects Animation Studios and moved to Texas. This provided a firm foundation in visual effects and CGI animation, where he could mix his illustration skills with his love of storytelling. Working his way up as a creative resource in all aspects of production, he became an integral leader and director at their West Coast outpost, Radium Real Effects. He eventually joined Academy Award-winning Moonbot Studios in Louisiana and found his way to interactive work. His directorial work on the film and game experience for Chipotle Mexican Grill, The Scarecrow, has won every major advertising award, including a Cannes Lions, Clios, and Webby Awards. The project sparked an interest for the integration of the audience in the stories he wanted to create. This led him to co-found Flight School, an immersive design studio, and ultimately the Department of Wonder, which he sees as a mix of his talents. He is happily married and a proud father of 3 children who serve as his most demanding audience and source of constant inspiration. Everybody, please, please, please help me welcome my very special guest, Mr. Limbert Fabian.
Cheer.
I like to say, hey, we treat our guests like the superstars that they are. Well, thank you so much for joining me today on The Color of Motion. I can't thank you enough for coming in and sharing your story and your journey through the industry. Obviously, through your bio, you got a vast knowledge of the things that you worked on. So super excited to be sitting down and talking with you.
Thank you. It's my pleasure. I'm really excited for the conversation. Like you said, I feel like we had a pre-interview conversation. I love it. There's plenty to unpack and get into.
Definitely. Mr. DeWine, welcome, Limbert. Appreciate that for sure. Miss Granny loves it. Again, everybody, you know how I love to do this show. Make sure, like I said, you hop in and really make this an interactive show here. That's what we love here at The Color of Motion. I like to start out, Limbert. Kind of what age did you discover this was something that you kind of wanted to get into and do for a living?
As far as I can remember, I've always had a pencil or crayon in my hand and been drawing. I think my mom says as early as 2. And there's pictures of like family pictures. I'm like hiding under a table, scribbling away in sketchbooks and stuff. And I think I always knew this was going to be more than just a passion. I think it was going to be a way of life early on. And I had parents that were super encouraging of that. And so anytime I had an opportunity to use art as a way to reach out to people or make friends, I would just use it. I would just rally around. Well, look at this thing I did, and try to meet people that way. And um, it also just it just allowed me to disappear into my head too. I think it was always
Yeah.
just a way to live. Not that I was a shy person or introverted, maybe a little at the beginning, but it was just a place I just felt comfortable in and
Yeah.
learning and wanted to keep growing. And I also fell in love with movies the second. I think this is probably cliche, but I remember seeing there was I think this old Douglas Fairbanks movie. I was really really young. I don't remember the name of the movie, but it looked like Technicolor.
Mm.
At a family member's house, and it was on the television. They put it on for us and the kids, and we were just watching this, and it was dubbed in Spanish. And it just the images really spoke to me, and the way everything moved, it felt like art moving and people emoting through that art. And then of course when I was, I think, 12, going to see Empire Strikes Back,
Yeah.
completely just, I was like, all right, whatever that is, I want to be part of it.
Yeah, I think that kind of captured. That was the movie
Yeah,
that kind of captured and did it for everybody as
it did.
well.
I was like, okay, this is crazy. This is bigger than life.
Oh man, but it's interesting, like you said, that you said that, because I think that's kind of the norm for creatives and artists. Particularly, they use their art to kind of just go off into their own kind of world at
Mhm.
times and create their own kind of space. I was the same way. I loved comic strips. Comic strips was more my thing, so I was really a big
Absolutely.
diehard Peanuts fan. But just you know, I loved drawing, I loved art, and I loved my toys. And when Toy Story came out, I was like, okay, I get Toy Story.
Yeah,
Every child thinks their
we know
toys.
that universe. We know that universe because we all did that.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Every child thinks their toy is alive and just, creates their own world with it. So those kind of movies are like big drivers for creatives and things like that. And it's interesting, you said your parents were really kind of encouraging. Did you did you have like a circle of friends kind of growing up that were kind of interested in the same things, or was it,
No,
just
no, I mean, not immediately. I think not until I got to high school. I went to arts magnet high school in New York, and that's where all that kind of blossomed. All those connections kind of came alive. But in elementary school, not to the sixth grade, did I realize there were other kids who were drawing and doing stuff. There was an art class in the sixth grade that had a bunch of students, and there were two other students that were really, really talented. I was just like, first day of school, I was like, I thought my stuff was great. We put it up, and we had enough. The teacher gave us a homework assignment before the beginning of the school year for the incoming class, and everyone put their work up. And I saw this work, and I was blown away also by not just the fact that it was amazing. There was a young man named Phil, and then a girl named Julia. But I was like, oh my, girls and boys can draw. Like, this is amazing. Like, but I was blown away. And then, find out like they were going like, who did this thing? Asking about the thing I did.
yeah, yeah,
But that was like the sixth grade was the first time where I had like, I gotta be friends with these guys. What are you guys doing? And it became like a really cool competitive thing, and everyone showing their stuff to each other and kind of just looking at things together really became part of the norm. And I really, really enjoyed that. I really cherished those opportunities. I always had friends after that I really looked up to and their craft and what they were doing and learning from them
yeah.
uh, as we moved along.
So how do you feel like, growing up, because New York has its own kind of vibe. It's kind of almost kind of like Texas. It's kind of has its own kind of vibe. So how do you feel like growing up in New York? I know New York had its graffiti scene and creative scene as well, not just, art, but there was theater and all of this. So how do
Yeah.
you feel like New York has kind of bled into your work and your creativeness?
Oh, absolutely. it was a big part of my. I think it influenced the way I think about work. And New York is, I mean, the entire place is just a giant art scene in general. I think that the way people express themselves with clothing, with music, the mashing of cultures, of the aesthetic of those cultures over each other, and all of that stuff coming together to me is just, it's part of, I think it influenced the way I think about my work in general. Like I don't think I have a specific house style, but I think I try to like pull in what makes the story come alive and be delivered in the most impactful way. I think New York has a lot to do with that. Graffiti was a big part of it. I fell in love with graph art. I fell in love with people's books, and and I have family members that were in crews and trying to, like, I'm like, what? How do you do this? And I remember even I had a cousin who was like, your name's gonna be Jaga. He like gave me like my tag name. I was like, you're not gonna do this on buildings, but this, he's like, he gave me a sketchbook and he's like, you're gonna fill this up, and this is your book, and you show people what you do. And that's a big part of definitely of my creative upbringing is all of that. And then just walking through the city. I think I said it's
Yeah,
just
yeah,
stopping and seeing public art, and then also culturally, right? The museums and access to the arts is something that's really, really amazing. Being able to go to the Brooklyn, the Bronx, the Manhattan Museum, all the museums of art, the Guggenheim, and all being there within, like, just within walking distance of every, just being able to have that access to that was terribly important to me. And I enjoyed all of it. I remember
yeah.
doing book reports on John Singer Sargent. I can go see a sergeant at the museum and sit there and draw and like work out what he was doing and understand what they're trying to do. And I think that accessibility, that was really, really powerful. And again, just it was a total, like, a temple of open expression, right? And I think that was really cool. That and music. My parents were big music fans,
Yeah,
and my dad was an audiophile. But Saturday was like record shopping day,
yeah.
and so we had records in the house, and the album covers also were a huge influence
Huge.
on.
Yeah,
I'm like,
yeah,
okay, there's music, and then this is the image that they chose for the album, and what does it mean? And like unpacking all that stuff was a really big deal for me. So
yeah. Albums, like I said, were artwork pieces in them. You
yeah,
sometimes you just couldn't wait for the next album to come out to see what the
yeah.
album cover looked like because they were coming up with so many different creative things. Now I've never been to New York. So it's kind of on my bucket list. I'd like to visit, but it's interesting. How do you think, like Into the Spider Verse and that animation kind of blended the style of New York, and what is your thought on that?
I think that, yeah, they did a really good job. The sequence with, I think the stuff with his uncle and that relationship and the look of the subway, like all that stuff. That is, I think that's, they did the research and they nailed what a New York is.
Yeah,
I think that's really cool, and the where they live, and I think all of that's there. There's definitely the city as a character in the film,
yeah,
and New York is, I think in every film, New York ends up being a character because of its history and its vibrancy. But I think that animation wise, they did a really, really good job. It's not just the brownstone version of New York. It's not just the inner city version of New York. It's not also the Wall Street version of New York, where it's
yeah,
like tall buildings and oh my gosh, the Statue of Liberty, whatever. Like they did a really good job of like of balancing all that and making it feel grounded to his universe. And I think the academy too, the fact that he was going to school at a very unique place for
yeah,
gifted students is that's accurate. You
yeah.
see that everywhere.
And like you said, it became a character in and of itself, just the whole city vibe and everything.
Yeah.
Um, what do you feel like? And you've gone to several different schools and everything like that. What did you kind of pick up from each one of them that really kind of helped you? Like, what did you get from like Ringling? What did you get from the other schools? Were there certain things that you picked up um, that they gave
Yeah.
you a lot more?
I think in my in my craft, I think early on, the elementary school experience in that sixth grade exposed me to showing my work to others and not just like this is mine.
Yeah,
That was like the first brush with that. So saying that, hey, this is, people are going to look at this, and you got to be prepared for their opinion. So critique became a big part of the early work, and also taking chances with the work. I remember entering competitions. I'm like, there's a poster contest in the city, and like, an anti-drug campaign. I was like, I'm gonna submit my stuff and see if we get in,
Yeah.
and then validation once you do get in, like, oh my gosh, someone paid attention to this. This is real. But that early on was a big part of like showing your work was my biggest thing I got out of like going to high school and performing arts high school, where the teachers are encouraging you to like, here's the project, share with the class what you did.
Yeah.
Ringling took that a step further, where you need to talk about your work and explain what you were doing and communicate your intentions, and like, I use this material because this and this, and try to explain that to a class, and then wait for their feedback was also really integral and humbling, and understanding of like what this is about. You make a thing, you should be able to articulate why, or communicate what you're trying to do, and being challenged that way was really, really good. So Ringling really did that. And then outside of that, the biggest thing I think for higher education, maybe I think it is about the connections. I
Yeah.
met my directing partner at Ringling. I met some of my best, collaborative creative friends at that school. They're all doing amazing work, and it's about, I think, the people you meet. It wasn't like, oh, I went to Ringling. I'd never lead with that. I was like, oh yeah, I know so and so. Oh, this person went to Ring. That the connections, the community of artists and
Yeah.
creative individuals that you meet and kind of carry with you along the way was maybe worth the investment,
Yeah.
for sure.
Yeah.
But as far as the craft, I don't know. It all depends. It depends on what you're doing specifically, what it is you're after. That might be different for everybody.
Well, I mean, like I said, you have a lot of skill sets in a lot of different areas. We're gonna dive into some of the
Yeah.
things that you're doing now and some of that. Was there ever a time where you were saying, I'm just going to go down the illustration route, or like I said, you wanted to go down the film and animation
Yeah.
route. Now you're doing a lot of VR stuff. Is it just the whole of being a creative, or did you kind of want to kind of go down the lane of that?
I think it was being a creative first, and then how do I take that and make a living at it? Illustration was like, I understood how. I think I knew the process, and I learned that at school, which was like, you got to put a portfolio together, show it to some publishers, see what they think. They're going to hire you for what you have in your portfolio, and it's you're making the artwork, and it gets produced, right? And then they call you for the next job, and you gain a following that way. The the interesting thing about film was I had this Star Wars stuff in the back of my mind, but then I'm seeing music videos, and I'm watching the creative process go from a still image to a moving image. And I was like, I'm like, these guys are these are artists. This isn't just about a filmmaker. There's some sort of like creative process, I think, that I'm involved in, or how do I get involved in? And there was a moment where I go, well, do I want to go to film school after college? I'm like, I don't want to keep going to school, first of all, but do I need to go to film school? But there was the license of, you're a creative person. I think you can step into this.
Yeah.
Luckily, I think film also offers an opportunity where I think it's one of those things that if you show up and go, I want to put in the work, I want to learn, you can kind of like work your way into a situation and learn a thing, right? So I think I was like, well, maybe I can get film school by just being in the business and see what happens. And luckily for me, I was able to go from illustrator, designer into an art department at a studio, where I just lobbed onto whatever I could learn about. I'm like,
Yeah.
there's a shoot going on today. I want to be on the shoot. There's what are we doing? What's pre-pro? Like, I wanted to understand the entire parts of the process, just because that's how I wanted to learn. I was like, well, this is like film school.
Yeah.
So I soaked it up. I was like, in the back of my mind, I was like, all right, I remember this from the behind the scenes documentary on this movie. This person does this, and I can identify that person in the studio. I just wanted to learn from that.
Yeah.
Also, I went to school when Pixar was doing Listerine commercials, right? So
Yeah.
I knew
Yeah.
the computer and CGI and Photoshop were parts of the work. They were early parts of the business. I knew that computers were going to play a big part. I think that CGI animation ultimately was something I could have pursued as a mixture of art and film. But again, I was nervous about, well, like I'm going to just learn how to use a software package and I'm going to do that.
Yeah.
Is that too limited? I was worried about being limited in like in the specific lane. I kind of wanted to try different things,
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah.
and work my way up into a place where where my voice can stand on its own in the way that it was kind of standing on its own as an illustrator. Like, hey, that guy, we want him to do this because he has a specific thing he does that we like that he does. I kind of wanted the same thing out of being a creative in the film industry. Was like, well, you have an opinion. There's something about what you're doing that I want to engage with. Let's bring you in. So I kind of set out to be as engaged as I could be, so I can learn
Yeah.
and teach
Yeah.
whatever was
I
out
think
there.
that's always the best avenue to get at a studio, just get practical training
Yeah,
is as good, if not better, than going to a school and sitting, learning the principles of it. But then, like I said, you actually get into a studio and see the inner workings of
yeah.
it and see how it
There's
really
the
works.
machine, there's the process, right? But like I said, I'm not discounting art school. I think learning how to compose a picture, understanding
Yeah.
color theory, like why things work, decision making around composing an image, and I'm sure film school in the same vein, the same thing. It's like if what I wasn't picking up in the studio, I was also picking up on, watching all the behind the scenes footage.
Oh
I was
yeah.
trying to learn how Anton Corbin makes a music video. I'm trying to understand how a director like Wes Anderson is telling a story with the use of image. Like all of those things are kind of that's the homework you're doing as well. It's like there is a process. Scorsese's Taxi Driver is a specific film, and all this stuff is going on. Like I'm like, these are all choices that are being made. Like, why was that being made? Like
Yeah.
that doesn't happen by accident. They're not filling that room up with random things to make it feel like New York. They're doing it's all by choice, right? And
Yeah.
the use of color in a film, and like all of that matters. Like that to me is where my brain goes. Like, oh, this is like creating an illustration. You're like the choices I'm making here all add up to
Yeah.
telling a much global story. And I think that's what really excited me about getting into filmmaking and storytelling in motion, if you will.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, you know, what are the types of stories that you're, and we're going to take a look at, your reel and what you're working on kind of currently, but what are the types of stories that you're kind of hoping to tell? We're starting to see a lot of different, creators create their ideas and their stories, get out there, everything from, Nickelodeon children's style stuff to, the amazing or Spider Verse to, the more cerebral anime type of animations and films. I mean, and it's not, and we talked about this before. It's not just animation. You're doing live film as well. But what are the
Yeah.
types of stories that you're kind of hoping to bring out more?
I I on a personal level, I want to go back. I want to mine from we talked about earlier how I was lost in my sketchbook and I was kind of in my imagination, and
Yeah,
it was a way to escape. I kind of want to tell stories of that escape. I want to go like, the student or the kid that feels out of place, but he's got so much to offer if he only people can see into his head, that sort of thing. There's a story I've been working on about a kid who is really good at video game at this one arcade and at his pizza shop near his house. And I think that, and which is a big nod to like The Last Starfighter. The video game is actually
yeah,
a recruiting tool for alien campaign, all this stuff. I think that sort of stuff is. I'm a big sci-fi fan. I think that mixing uh, the sort of like grounded human experience with this thing that's bigger than Earth, and drawing people in that way is really exciting to me. But I'm also a big fan of Michel Gondry and folks that are doing this stuff that just feels like every frame is not wasted. There's just a piece of art and living art in the picture that really says and telegraphs to the audience the internal emotions of a character. I think stuff like that is really exciting for me from a pure art POV, and um, so those kind of stories are interesting. And then the thing that I'm most excited about as a creator now is like, well, all this is about a conversation with the audience, and
yeah,
it is. exciting to think about, well, if you're using film, obviously the audience is in a very passive state, but they're taking in what you're showing them. So you're making all the decisions about what they should and shouldn't look at. And
Yeah.
then you got something like VR where you're what do you want them to do? How passive do you want them to be? As passive as you want them to be, you have no control about their agency. So what do you give them, and how do you allow them to arrive at a place you want them to look at and observe or participate in? And I think participating is interesting in the word of a movie. Like, well,
Yeah.
a movie by tradition a very passive experience. How do you invite an audience to participate with you
Yeah.
and be part of that storytelling? So that's a whole other arena, but I think that it's still that's an interesting place to play when it comes to storytelling. It's like, well, okay, now that the audience is here, what do you do with them, and why are they here? And what we call it, we try to figure out how to cast the audience,
Yeah.
and
Yeah. No,
how to
and we had this big conversation, even before the show, of like this more immersive, interactive experience with the audience, and we were talking about VR, and the Apple headset, and just where kind of the industry is kind of going. There's a lot of like I said, just this. We're at this seems like crossroads now with technology and where technology is going, with the VR headsets getting better and better, AI starting to, seep into the industry. Um, what is your kind of thought on, like I said, just where we're at right now and how much further along do you see it before it really kind of gets to the point where you're almost like Ready Player One, where we're in this environment where we're just totally interacting and having these kind of conversations and relationships with people. We kind of do it now
yeah,
online, but to this point where, like I said, it gets to that Ready Player One. If you haven't seen Ready Player One, you may
yeah,
not know what I'm talking about, but it's you should watch it. It's a really good movie. Um, but we were talking just about the technology of just the Apple's new Vision Pro glasses and stuff, and the applications of what
yeah.
VR can be used for.
Yeah, I think we're still in the Wild West in this whole thing. Creatively, one of the things that goes like, well, do people really want to be in a situation where it feels like they're in Ready Player One, a world where everyone's plugged in, but then you go like, well, we kind of are. We're already plugged in via our devices. I'm on my phone. I got social
Yeah,
media. There's a version of that, but the use case for that world right now is very specific. It's like I look at my device and I have access this way. That's how I engage with that space. I think we are going to get into a space where the handheld device will go away, and we'll engage with that media in a very different way, and um, fully immerse ourselves in a different way. But I think it's always going to be a layer of the real world and the virtual together, kind of like this XR mixed reality experience that I think the Apple Pro headset kind of winks at. Like, this is the
yeah,
beginning of something, mixing all of that stuff together. I you know it's exciting. We're still a ways off where everyone's like, yeah, but we'll get to a place where like that stuff will look like this. It'll be a
yeah,
pair of glasses, and you can switch out, from full immersion to mixed immersion. I think that's kind of cool, and we'll get there. We were talking about earlier is like I don't know we know exactly how this is going to be used. I think about creators that look at the way they use social media as a tool to communicate an idea and communicate a brand or something. And that's completely different than the way people did traditional television commercials,
yeah,
years ago. So I think about, and filmmakers playing with these tools. There's yet stuff to be discovered and designed and imagined. I think that's really exciting. I To me, it's all tools. It's
yeah,
all like, how can this tool help me communicate this idea, and will it help sort of elevate the concept in some unique way? Um, so that's an exciting place to be. I
yeah,
look at every tool with that eye, and then if you do that, then I think it allows you to then create something special that no one's seen on that device, because you're using it to the limitations of the device. You're designing for the device specifically, as opposed to, I made a movie and I'm gonna put it on the headset. Yeah, but your choices in the movie are completely different than the headset choices. So that when you're watching in the headset, it's not going to play the same unless you watch it inside of a frame inside your headset, which is like having a virtual theater in your headset, and that's what you're watching, which means you're making it look like you intended to look like when you shot it traditionally. Then you got to go, well, then why'd you put on the headset? You don't have to put on the headset. It doesn't make any sense. So my point is, like, what are the rules about this medium that allow it to stand out and do something unique? Then try to design the narrative to fit within that realm and cater to the limitations of that device, and then see what happens.
Yeah.
Um, that to me is an exciting place. Again, it's all very experimental. Locomotion, for example. Like I'm gonna be in this thing I did with MLK. We was all centered around the March for Freedom. I was like, and the initial thing was like, we're gonna have you march. I was like, wait a minute, you really can't. You could, but I don't want you walking around with a headset. Like you should. Like, you're not doing that. So
Yeah.
the idea of locomotion, the idea of moving, what your body feels like. I'm going to say grab this, but you can grab it virtually, but you're not really grabbing it. So do you use your controller? If you're using the controller, is holding the control in your hand take away from you feeling like you're in a specific place or in a
Yeah.
moment? Like these are the kind of choices that begin to send you have to solve for and go, okay, well, yeah, yeah, yeah. It's easy to go, I'm going to put you in time machine. I'm going to like your Ready Player One idea
Yeah.
is wonderful because your avatar goes to a place. Also, he's in a rig, he's in a suit, he's
Yeah.
wearing body like clothing that allows him to feel what he's feeling
Pain.
in virtual
Yeah.
space.
Feel the
And
actual physicality of his
exactly. And I
environment.
think that's coming, but that's on the high end of stuff. And I don't know if that's going to be something where everyone's going to be like, I want to do that because I want to feel that. Maybe we'll get there.
Yeah.
The question would be like, do people want to do that? That's a thing.
Well, I'm like you in that, I look at all of this technology and advancements as tools to how can I use this to get my idea out and this and that. But you obviously, I'm pretty sure you're aware of kind of the big thing about AI and just the legalities and copyrights of things.
Mhm.
What are your thoughts on AI as it pertains to that? And is that something that, and I'm pretty sure you've come across artists just like I have that are on both sides of the fence. They're for it, they think it's a tool, and there's other ones that just hate it because it's just scraping, it's just really
Yeah.
digging into people's IP and their copyrights and things like that.
I think I'm in the middle of the tool in those two camps. I think as a device, as a tool, as an aid, as a thing that you can lean into to exploit what's and help ideate and help frame. It's like having an assistant that knows exactly the way you think about something and helps you get there.
Yeah.
And so cuts down time, which I think is really wonderful. Um, where I'm on the fence about it is the scraping of artists and materials, right? And like the source, what AI might be being trained on
Yeah.
might be, an issue. It's like, well, I described it like this, and it's pulling from all these other sources to get the thing I desired. Okay, that's great. It's if I'm as an artist, I think I know where to push and pull and then take from that and adjust and then reference and paint over and draw over or whatever. I think as a tool for a creative person, it's one thing. But as a tool for someone that doesn't have the background or doesn't have the creative sort of the hours put in to call themselves an artist or is trying to be an artist, it's a little problematic because they go, well, okay, I wanted a sunset vista and I got a sunset vista in the style of, whatever. And you're just like, okay, but you're also you're not acknowledging that, or do you, I don't even this thing, I don't know if you have to acknowledge it, but I think you're not acknowledging that the reference that you gave it is super specific. You wanted it to look like this person's work. You want it to look like, you know, Van Gogh. I want to do my version of a Van Gogh sunset, but it's, going to have flying saucers in it.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. You're referencing a Van Gogh painting. Is it original because you put flying saucers in it? Maybe, yes, that is an original idea that you came up with, but the way it's created and to call it your own, I think that's a little problematic. But I think for me, it's a reference point. It's like, yes, it's about the motion of the brushstrokes that I like, and I want to figure out how to do that with this idea. And I'm referencing, yeah, because as creative artists, you're constantly pulling references. Like it's going to feel like this, like this, like this. The tone of this is going to be this, and it's always you're pulling from, you're kind of saying things. So this just gets you there faster. Um, but there's still where it's legal is where it's a little
Yeah.
blurry, and calling it
And
your own is
and does
tough.
it and does it kind of shortchange them in the process of learning the principles of whatever it is? Say the
Yeah,
principles of animation. There's obviously principles that go along squash and
yeah.
stretch and this and that. Like you said, I think it's a great tool that
If you're
can
already
help
if
short.
you already learned it, yeah. If you already learned it, you know what you're doing, and you're pushing and pulling because you know what you're doing. If you don't, and just like anyone off the street is going like, yeah, I want it to look like Bugs Bunny, like what about Bugs Bunny? And there's like, you're talking about Chuck Jones, you're talking about so and so. And it's like it, it's that thing. Is well, it looks like Bugs Bunny. I don't care. Like they're just their heads are it's just so on the surface. But yeah, I don't know if it's
And then
incredibly
they call
powerful.
themselves an artist or a filmmaker or animator or a writer when all they did was put in prompts, but they didn't understand the principles of storytelling, the principles
Mm,
of putting things together. I think that's what I kind of like. I said,
yeah,
I'm kind of in the middle. Like I said, I look at
yeah,
it as a tool, but I went to school. I've learned the principles of design and things like that, so I know how to use it. But those ones that just, oh, okay, this is a quick way that I can write a movie. I can just put in
yeah,
prompts to
exactly.
write out a
And
script.
exactly, and you got to be able to know where to push and pull and take from and borrow. And yeah, it's tough. I'm not quite sure if a person that doesn't have this creative background has an idea, because everyone has ideas, right?
Yeah,
We're entitled and able to do that, and but crafting it, and making the tool's still not there yet. Where you go like, I wrote a film and the film's gonna get produced, and like the images are not consistent. Like all of that, it's just stuff that has to be unpacked. It will get there someday where you can prompt and you're gonna get a version of something out. And I'm just blown away how fast that's already happening. From like Mid Journey
yeah.
to Sora today. You're just like, yeah, it's bonkers. I love it. I think it's really exciting to see how fast that is happening. But it's also who should have access to that
Yeah.
as a tool. I don't know. That's where
Well,
I'm like fuzzy, right?
and the way I see it, like I said, any tool, like any tool, there are always going to be people that use the tool the wrong way or not
Yeah,
how it was intended to use.
yeah, right.
A car is a tool, but there's a lot of people that get killed by driving in a
Yeah,
car. A gun is a tool, but obviously there's a lot of people that'll use a
people
gun
use
the
it
wrong
the wrong
way.
way. Exactly. Yeah, yeah,
So I think, like I said, it's like you said, it's kind of the Wild West. There's still some things that they have to work out, legality wise, but as a tool to help people, to help real creatives, really ideate. And I think those are the ones that really know how to use it the right
yeah.
way.
I
They
think
know how
it's
to
that's
use it.
interesting. I mean, training an AI on like if I fed it my sketchbook and I'm like, cool, all right. So that's take all that, and then I want to do 25 story. I want to do 20. I want to do storyboards, and then using my aesthetic or the way I draw a female character or the way I draw an action thing, like it grab all that information and then begin to do something that is appealing to me as an artist,
Yeah.
as a creator, and it's based on the way I'm thinking, or the way I approach to making an image. I think that's kind of interesting. And there's parts of the process, specifically in filmmaking, that are interesting. That like if it's just to get to the next level, it is incredibly powerful. Like a storyboard sequence might be something that could be aided or started with, and then you go like, well, let's change. All right, great. These are the good start. Let's change all of this right here, and then have the wherewithal to go. No, specifically do this right. I think that's potentially really powerful. Like the shortcuts that it allows you to have are interesting. But again, you got to be at the helm of it. You got to be a creator at heart, and
Yeah.
and
No,
kind
I
of
agree.
command that ship, right?
And as a creator, I'm always curious, because I think it's something creators kind of go through at some period of at a time. How do you kind of work through those periods of creator block or a hard,
Mm,
you're just having a hard time kind of getting through something or getting
yeah.
something done? Or do you have though at this point in your stage working on so many different things, do you have those moments where it's just rough getting through, and
Yeah.
you have these hard blocks?
Absolutely, yeah. The the block, the creative block for sure in the past I've experienced, and I think one of the things that I practice is I try to do something completely different to take my mind off of the work I'm trying to do. So if I'm going through a season where I'm doing a specific thing and I can't break that thing that I do, I go watch, or I do something completely different. I don't go watch a film. I think I go listen to. I'm gonna just go watch a lot of live music and see
Yeah,
someone else do what they do, and just let that, and just be a consumer of, and be a fan of, and just engage with other media or the content as an audience member. That helps me a lot. I try to like switch gears. I learned that early on in school, like even in, I think in early in college and in high school, I would just like, I just can't get over it. I would just switch gears. I would just put music on and I'd go for a walk and I just kind of just switch it up. And then it may take days or it may take a couple of hours where it's like, oh yeah, it's right in front of me. I wasn't even thinking about that state the entire time.
yeah,
It's the idea for fresh eyes. It's just to be able to switch gears and come back to the project with different eyes.
yeah.
I've also been on this side of the fence where I've had burnout, and burnout's a real thing where I'm like, I don't want to do this. This is
I'm glad to think I'm not the only one.
no, man. Like, there's nothing about this that's exciting, and if I'm doing it because I got a responsibility to get it finished, like there's that that friction of like I don't want to do this,
Yeah,
and I'm doing it, and my heart's not in it, and um, but I'm gonna power through it. Yeah, I've been on that side of it, and that was more uncomfortable than the artist block, honestly. It's
yeah,
just you're not motivated, and to find motivation and thing. I think it was a matter of like maybe just taking a break and doing something completely different.
yeah, yeah,
You know, it's easier now to do that with a family and kids. You just it's easier to kind of just turn off the things that you can't dedicate time to, and just there's so much more to focus on. You've got
yeah,
kids,
yeah,
relationships you have to nurture and grow. I think all of that adjusts accordingly. But yeah, it's a you got to find time to turn it all off and do something different.
yeah.
And
And you kind of jumped into my next question because I was going to say is a little different now that you have a wife and kids that help to balance and kind of
yeah,
like you said take you out of those kind of moments where you're frustrated or you're stuck or just have to have
yeah,
that kind of break.
yeah. There's always, I mean, you have I have a much bigger audience and a sounding board. My wife is integral, and I share some, and she doesn't hold back. I think she's just like, her criticism is wonderful because it's like it's just completely like, well, this is what you just told me, and this is what I hear, and this is what it feels like, and that's great. And then the kids too, like you just kind of bounce stuff off of them, and
Yeah.
you get a POV that I'm like, wow, I never
They're
that makes
they're unedited. They'll give you
they're
this.
unedited. It's like, yeah, you're right. I never thought of that. We were doing this thing and on set, and we're trying to figure out how to get this thing to work, and we had a vision for it, and there was just a kid on set who was like, "You should stick the powder in here, and it looks like it's coming." And I was like, "That's that's the simplest way of doing that, and it's the most perfect way of doing that because it's like it's so uncomplicated, and
Yeah.
it's what yeah, I love that. I think trying to see work with childlike, wonder is interesting. My wife and I started we have a small group with our church, but we have a group, a doodling group. She started it, but I picked it up recently where I'm leading it. And I love that group because I try to just, it's about talking to folks, but also like just mindlessly drawing in a sketchbook and cutting things up and spilling color on the tea. Like it's
Yeah.
about the communal act of making art together, but it's also, there's no agenda. And I
Yeah.
love that about that. It's like, okay, and maybe your brain needs to kind of do that. So these are just kind of go off into the fringes and see what it comes back with. And I think that's exciting.
Yeah. And it's funny, like I said, that you mentioned that because, it was that was almost part of the reason why I started the show. Um, Not just to, inspire other kids, but it was just, I felt like I was in this place. And I think once you start making a living and having to pay bills
Yeah.
and having the responsibilities of making a life is when you start to kind of drift out of this. Well,
Hmm.
why did I, try to remember why you were, just the joy of, like you said,
Yeah.
sitting down with a pencil and paper and just drawing type of thing.
That's it. I think you're right. It's like reminding yourself like why you enjoy what you do, and um yeah, and that it happens. I mean, it happens in different moments. There's times where I'm like writing something and I'm like, oh, I got to get through the writing part of this. This isn't fun. But then there's a thing you find a thread and you're in it and you're just like, oh yeah, this is just like making up, a scene with my GI Joe characters. Like I'm just in the moment and it feels so fulfilling because you get to play. And that's what
Yeah.
ultimately what's at the end of the day is like I want to find ways to continue to play as an adult, as a creative person, to remind me of why I do what I do. And it's like, oh, there's a mark that I made that really felt really that looks great. It's really pleasing and appealing to me, and it communicates a thing that I felt was in my head. Or there was a moment in a story that we are telling an animation or a film that we're making, and that you're like, wow, that's exactly the way I saw it in my head, and there it is. And it took all these folks to make that come to life, and it's in front of me. And I think that's really, really, really wonderful and pleasing. And um, yeah, it's exciting. It's just reminding you like, yeah, at the end of the day, this is fun. I remember having joy out of it, and I want to make sure I can keep doing that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Even if I have to figure out how to make money at it, I still want to get joy out of that, right?
Yeah, and I think that's the beauty of like what you were mentioning earlier of going to school, and that was kind of the thing I picked up as I started, doing the show and really connecting with people. As large as the industry is, it is really a small community of people that creatives that kind of feed off of each other. They work together. They can pass. Hey, there's this company that's looking, and that's how I found that a lot of people move around from project to project or job to job is they've either worked with the person before or gone to school with them or built some type
Yeah.
of relationship with them. And it's a community that really does help to kind of keep each other going through the whole
Yeah,
process.
you're absolutely right. It is. That's what's really cool about this industry is like you kind of get if you get a foothold in, it's really up to you. You know, I I decided I was like I just want to show I want to show up, do the work, and let the work speak for itself, and then engage with people in an honest way. Like I try not to have an ulterior motive. I'm like, okay, you're engaging me with this. Thank you for the opportunity, and then just going from that point, like just take one step at a time. And usually what happens is people remembered you from the thing you did, like, you know what, you should talk to so and so. Your art, there's something about you, what you're doing here that really would help this thing over there. And you should talk to that person. I think that's what's really cool about this business in general. Is just that organic thing when you just show up and try not to orchestrate too much. Just show up and do the work. Like
Yeah.
put in, do the best you can do, be the best at what you are, be the expert in the arena that you're being hired for and do that really well. And then all the other doors begin to open because I think the way you approach that
Yeah.
shines
Yeah.
through.
Well, and I have to ask you as a creative because I feel like this is kind of especially if you're not working at a studio, if you're doing freelancing or you have your own business or something like that. Was that was that something that was a little more challenging for you? Because I find for me, that's the thing I have to work hardest at is okay. How do I make this a business? How do I make this? How do I
Mm,
make this something that's viable? That I'm not just sitting down doing the work. I'm having to go out, connect with people, talk to
yeah,
network and talk with people to
yeah, yeah.
really make it something that's a business that's going to grow and sustain my life.
I think you have to. I mean, for me, it was a little in small steps. Out of college, trying to get work as an illustrator meant I had to go show people my portfolio and getting engaged that way. Cool. And then that leads to the next thing. And then how do you grow that even more beyond just the publishers? I started doing album covers for bands, and it was literally me going to a show and going, trying to get to the backstage and going, love you guys. I don't know you guys, who I am. I don't know. You probably don't know. Do you have any artwork for the next album? And just asking. And so there's a networking part. And then ultimately, when you get into a situation where you want to grow it and you're working in an industry, you want to sort of do your own thing, you have to figure out how to wear different hats. Like, I'm in promo mode, I'm in director mode, I'm in designer mode. I'm like, it's all, or I'm, social media mode. I think you have to figure out what it is that you need to go take care of and go do that. And then also lean in on the help of other people that are experts in their field. Like, I don't have this thing. How do I get that thing? I gotta talk to this person. And I think it's about, being able to communicate, socially, and how, how to have the emotional intelligence to be able to engage with others, and ultimately then also be able to talk about your work and what it is you're trying to do with your work. I think that's where the critique comes into play, and being able to take criticism and also give criticism back, and out of responsibility for the work and not about ego. And I think all that stuff plays into it. But I think the trying to turn it into a business and doing Department of Wonder was the hardest thing ever. We started it from scratch, and taking an idea that was already complicated to begin with, and to bring people along it's hard. It takes a lot of work. Making a film is a very, very, very hard work. You
Yeah.
got to forget, everyone's trying to bet on the sure thing, but there's no sure thing. And it's like, well, let's get it to as close as possible to this idea that everyone really, that resonates with everybody. How do we get that to life and bring it back to life, um, and make it work? And I think that's, you got to bring in all of these resources and people. You got to get people on board that believe in the thing that you're trying to make, and
Yeah.
get
Yeah.
it together. Yeah.
And that's a hard thing to really get people vested in your idea, to get behind your idea and to see it, come to fruition.
Yeah.
Is a very, it's almost a skill in and of itself, to
It
do
is.
that.
It is. It's tough, and some people are better. Are better than others. My directing partner Brandon Oldenburg is brilliant at connecting with people. He just has a knack for, hey, I remember you from this thing, and just it's a superpower.
Yeah.
We're both really social guys, but I just it's a joy to watch him work that way. He's kind of like authentically wants to get to know you, and that's a really wonderful thing. I think it's about seeing others, and we try to do that wherever we can. But it's really cool to see. That's a gift. Some
Yeah.
people are more shy than others, and they're just like, I don't know how I'm gonna break this conversation. How do I get into this thing? Or how do I get into that room? I want to be in that room. How do I get in that room? And it's like,
Oh man,
just
I
step
tell
into it.
you.
You gotta walk in and see what happens.
And most creatives, and like I said, and I've had this, conversation with just some people trying to get them as a guest on the show. They're like, I don't like being in front of the camera. I'm just the drawing person. And I don't, that type of thing. There are
Yeah.
just some people, like you said, just have a knack for the gift of the gab. They love to talk, and
Yeah. Yeah.
they
It's
can
good to
talk
have.
really easy. I find it really hard sometimes, like at networking events. It's almost like double dutch. You're looking to try and
Yeah.
jump into the conversation,
How do I
and
get in this thing?
how do
Yeah.
I get into this conversation type of thing. But some people just are very good at it.
Yeah, yeah, no, it's a hard one, man. I struggle with that, with the idea of like, that's when I want to respond to people authentically, and I want to be able to offer my opinion, or learn about someone, not just to be like, oh, I want to get to know you, but I really want to learn about you. And my wife gives me a hard time, but she's like a chameleon in a room. I'm like, what are you talking about? She's like, you endear yourself to people on their level, which she's like, it's really wonderful, but it's so weird to see happen. And I'm like, I'm not being fake. I just want to, they care about something, and I want to know why they care about that thing. And
Yeah,
I want to see myself in that thing. I'm curious. I'm really genuinely curious. And it's a interesting thing. It is just, where can you find a way into to do. I try to listen. That's the other thing, is just listening is a big part of it. Is like,
yeah, Yeah.
being like attentive and listening to those around you and see where that goes.
Yeah, yeah. Now that was definitely a big uh, one big learning factor doing this show is just learning to listen a whole lot
Mm.
more. And like I said, I found as I did that, you know, it opened you up to really being interested. And we were talking about this before the show, just being interested on and fascinated on people's journeys and how they're gotten to this point where they're at. And they're so varied and come from such different places. Like I said, I've had some guests on. It was like, you may know him. I don't know if you know him or not. Andre Rodriguez, a great guy. And
Mm.
he was on he's at the time I interviewed him, he was working for Blue Sky, but
Yeah.
now he's at Pixar. But he learned 3D and animation in prison. And when we first connected, I was like, dude, you should be telling this story, because it's just such a
Yeah.
fascinating, journey. You learned this in prison and now you're
Yeah.
working at Pixar. So these kind
That's
of journeys and paths, everybody has such a different path.
yeah.
You think everybody's journey is the same. They love art, they go to art school, they get their degree, they get into a studio. When that's not always the case. You
No,
got
it's not always
some,
the case. Yeah.
you
No, you're
got
right.
some,
Everyone's path is completely different, and sort of cut you off, but then you're right. You're right. It's like, but that's what's kind of cool about it is
yeah,
that you can forge your path. You
yeah,
can kind of like you can.
yeah,
I think you should have goals, but definitely like how you get to that thing is up to you, and it's going to be different in the way that it's for you than it's for me and it's for the other person. I think that's just really wonderful. I do
yeah.
really do love that about the business is like how people arrive at the thing that they are seeking to do. Right.
Yeah, and some have gotten a degree in something just totally different than
Yeah.
what they're doing, and I'm like, your degree isn't even in animation,
I
it's
know. I
in
know.
microbiology, and you got your degree in microbiology, and you're doing comic books,
I
that type of
know.
thing. So it's just such it goes to show you that where you start out doesn't necessarily negate to where you equate to where you end up, and you're
No,
always
absolutely.
able to make these adjustments in your path.
Yeah, and with every little adjustment is an opportunity to meet new people and where those people's paths lead, you never know. And it just that's what's really interesting is all those opportunities. We got into interactive work at Moonbot like out of like kind of like stumbled into it, but it wasn't like we were saying we're the experts in this thing or we only make applications for this device. Like it was like, no, we were using this device to help tell this story, and we just leveraged it as best we could. And then people noticed the results and going like, you guys are doing something that's very unique. I think approaching things as an outsider. I mean, I
Mm,
think about being in Texas. It's like having a studio here or having, being an animation director in Texas is interesting because everyone goes like, "Oh, you got to be in New York or in Los Angeles." I mean, we know that that's not the case anymore because you can,
yeah,
with virtual work, you can be anywhere. But um, trying to do a studio in the middle of the country is hard, but it's also it lets you be an outsider. You get to be you see it with a different POV than the machine that is in Los Angeles.
yeah,
You're not at Pixar. You're not at Blue Sky when it was in New York, like in Connecticut. I think it's so it allows you to go stand back and approach from a different POV. I think that in general, it's a really cool thing. Is how how you engage is up to you, right?
yeah,
And your POV does matter and it stands out, and use
yeah,
it.
yeah. Which, like I said, kind of goes into why I always say this is such a great time for creators because you don't necessarily have to go to Pixar if you want to be an animator, and you have all these channels now. We have all these channels to build our own audience to go directly to people
Mhm.
with the content that we make. If you're a filmmaker, hey, I can create a film and put it on YouTube and build a following. Um, so big to the point where, like I said, I'm pretty sure Mr. Beast didn't start out thinking that he was going to be this just mega, you
Yeah.
know, mega creator, and then all of a sudden studios or companies coming to him wanting to
Yeah,
buy his company for billions of dollars.
absolutely.
So
But
we're at this.
that's a perfect example of like not knowing what the medium is capable of. You have a young man who goes, there's an algorithm working here. I'm going to learn what this is and I'm going to do something with it, as opposed to I want to tell movies and put them on YouTube. Like he's thinking about it completely different than any of us are. And I
Yeah,
think that's what makes him stand out. And then you've got people knocking on his door to go like, well, how do you do it? Because what you're doing is completely special. And I think that's all to say that that's how all this technology stuff is just like, okay, this thing does this thing really well. How do I use it to do what I want it to do? Um,
yeah,
and when you do that, it really does. It lets you stand out because you're not forcing it to do a thing that it's not meant to do.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
so
And we had mentioned that before. I think that's when, when you get, tools in the hands of a creator, they're going to use it to fix whatever issue or kind of solve whatever thing that they're
mhm.
trying to solve. That just opens up that tool into a much wider thing than what the actual
Yeah,
company, created it for and developed it for.
agreed. I think that's really cool. Yeah, you were mentioning like think of Unreal, like
Yeah,
you know,
Unreal started out as a game engine. I
yeah,
mean, and then when directors got a hold of it, filmmakers got a hold of it, and started seeing the capabilities of visualizing their idea in real time and creating
yeah,
actual scenes that make it easier for the actor to interact with. It just opens it up into this much
yeah.
wider thing than what Unreal initially created Unreal
The tool,
for.
yeah, the tool changes, and it also it helps aid and you know make another industry change and flourish, and then vice versa, right? The creatives on the film side bring something to Unreal that is completely different. That I think that exchange of ideas and expertise is really cool. I mean,
Yeah,
that's as a creator today. There's so many avenues.
yeah. And
To,
tools are,
yeah.
like I said, Unreal's free. And tools are so readily available now. You got Blender for those that may not be able to have access to Maya or this and
Mhm.
that. You got It's such a more level playing field than it's ever been before. I think for the creator.
The barrier of entry, we were saying that earlier, is so low now, and you know you can make a movie on your iPhone, on your
Yeah,
phone mobile device, right?
and I've seen some pretty good, and it's really the tools it's not the tool, it's the creator. Any
Yeah,
tool in the hands of
exactly.
a good creator is going to use that tool to make something good. Like,
Absolutely.
like I said, you could make a film quality movie with an iPhone, and they've
Yeah,
even done
and
commercials
again,
with it.
it's what it's your if you can grab whatever you get your hands on to help tell the story that's in your head and get it out. Um, that's the thing. And for some people, that's drawing pictures and putting together a compelling comic book or a story. Like I think whatever device that you can get your hands on, whatever vehicle or venue that you can feel comfortable in, yeah, exploit that and see what happens, and then go from there.
Yeah, yeah. To everybody just jumping in, me and my man Limbert are having a fun conversation, talking technology, the industry, just art, being creative. Again, make sure you hop into the comments, say hello. If you have a question, you can throw it in there for sure. Um, what I mean, we touched a little on a few, but what are some of the things that have come out lately that have really inspired you, whether they're films or whether they're animations or whether they're
See,
VR things. What are the things that kind of that you've seen lately? Like you're like, wow, that was pretty cool the way they did that, or
yeah.
got you thinking, how did they do it?
Uh, Man, most recently, visual wise, I loved Oppenheimer. I thought
Mm,
that movie was really really special, and again, it's like it's a biopic, by
yeah,
Chris Nolan. But it feels so much bigger than just the character or the personality that he's examining.
he's a great director. I like Christopher Nolan. He's a
Yeah,
good
Chris Nolan's
director.
great. I like Tenet, as confusing as that movie was, but I really liked
Yeah,
it.
I liked
Um,
um, Inception, I thought was really
Yeah,
good.
yeah, Inception's great. Yeah, it's one of my
Uh,
favorites. Yeah, Chris Nolan's awesome. You know, he's since Memento. I think he's fantastic. But there's a let's see. I We were talking about the Vision Pro as a piece of technology. I was really impressed with what they've done and what the promise is there. I think it's really interesting. Spatial imagery is interesting. Spatial photography is interesting, and video. Um, Want to tinker with that some more. You know, I as a body of work, I really liked uh, Last of Us. Here's a game that's incredibly popular, and they adapted it into a film, a show, and the adaptation is such a really great thing that allowed all these characters to breathe in a way that you couldn't in the game. Of course, the game is completely different. You're meant to engage with it very differently, but what they did with that was really, really wonderful. Um, I liked Andor a lot. Same thing. I think that they took Star Wars and took it to a really unique space. Literally, like it just something really special there. The world about that universe felt bigger all of a sudden, which is really, really cool. And then, um, gosh, that's as far as like movies. You know, I haven't had a chance to see Dune yet. I
mhm.
know I'm like way behind the curve, but I need to go see that. I like the first one, but I haven't seen the second one, so I'm looking forward to seeing that. And Civil War, it looks like it should be seen this year, so I need to catch up with that.
Mhm.
Um, I really enjoyed it. I just watched literally on a flight back home. Uh, I watched The Holdovers. I thought that was really good. Right, I like Alexander Payne, but this was really cool. It just how it just felt like a specific time period, and everyone's performance was really authentic, and
Yeah, yeah.
that was really yeah.
We're getting ready to take a look at some of Limbert's work, but I want to ask you before we do you as a creative, when you're sitting down watching this, are you just initially watching it for the pure joy of watching it, or are you looking and kind of breaking things down with your creative hat of why they made this choice, why they did this choice, type of thing? Do you find you do that more now when you watch things?
I think I do that. I tend to do that when I watch like shows, you know, True Detective, you know, and anything that's a not Andor, but I'm talking about like a yeah, like Andor, like shows where like I have time to live with it and I
Mm-hmm.
can kind of follow. I try to approach all this stuff as a fan and just take it in. You know, walked into Oppenheimer not knowing anything else. Like, hey, this is going to be a Chris Nolan film. I'm ready for it, and not trying to dissect why he did what he did and then letting it sinking after. I love the conversation afterwards after watching. I love going to a movie and then talking to my buddy or talking to my wife about like that conversation afterwards is really, really, really rich. And I love that. I try to leave space for that so then I can unpack it there. Like let the movie wash over my head and like, you know, oh, this thing, or because they may notice something I didn't notice. And having room to do that is important. So I try to like open mind as much as possible and just see what happens and not go like, but there's some stuff I'm just like, man, I really want that to work, but it's not working. It's throwing me for a loop.
Yeah, I was talking to a friend. She was a Robbie Bissler, and she's a visual effects producer. And I was like, "Well, when you go to a movie, are you sitting,
Yeah,
critiquing the visual effects?" And she said, "Yeah, sometimes I find myself doing that." It's like, "Yeah, this
I know
didn't work."
it's kind of a hazard. Sometimes it sneaks in, just like, man, what is it about this thing that's just not working? And it's like, I feel the energy, something's off. Like, and this is craft. You're just like, oh, okay, that was a bad call, or
Oh man, it's hard to get out of. Sometimes it's hard to get
it
out of the vein of that for sure. Uh,
occupational hazard, occupational hazard.
yeah. Yeah. So let's take a quick look at some of Limbert's work there, and we're going to dive into this short here because I think it's really great what he's doing, especially in this VR space. So let's take